Hi, I'm Christopher Whiteside and I'm a textile student at University of Ulster. My work usually explores the concept of subjects that are often taboo or often avoided. Recently I've been researching the psychology of children's tales like The Three Little Pigs and The Ant and the Grasshopper. Usually these tales have characters where the children can question the morals behind, their actions, and it's more like a lesson for how to live life and what to not do. Usually in my work I like to twist the meaning of the story by turning the moral lesson on its head and allowing for the other side of the argument to be heard. I do this by creating my own characters and narratives, which I piece together from lots of different things like my own dreams, memories, stories I've written, and things I hear in the news, newspaper headlines, and real world events. I think that these patchwork narratives and characters reflect my personality and slightly eccentric perspective on things. But in some ways, a lot of my work it's like a cakewalk in comparison to my own imagination. Sometimes my ideas don't always come across exactly how I imagine them. I think sometimes I'm afraid to express it so openly. But what you do see is like looking through a window and only seeing part of the room inside or a piece of furniture. Hopefully it's something cool to look at and interesting to see. I guess you could say that my work is childlike but directed towards adults who have perhaps forgotten how to have fun anymore or how to play. Art is first and foremost play in my eyes. I think that's why I'm so engaged with the idea of masquerade and a performance on camera. Putting a mask on and becoming a different person, an animal or element, is something that's really exciting. Because you can see that the person's putting on a mask or a costume and they're becoming this character that you've invented and playing it out in front of you. So I'm almost like a showrunner of my own circus of misfits or animal rejects. So there's a certain theatricality about my work amongst the darkness that I try to create. I also try to inject humour into the stories and try to play with emotions. I either try to get a laugh or a shock or maybe a tear. I love film and photography. I've always been inspired by film, horror, fantasy and sci-fi. Films that I'd like would be The Thing, Alien, Blade Runner and Lord of the Rings. Films in particular that have inspired my current work were Lord of the Flies, The Wicker Man, and like many of David Lynch's films like Mulholland Drive and his short Rabbit. Lord of the Flies deals with lots of complicated issues such as isolation, social outcasts and mob mentality amongst a group of boys. The group of boys were shipwrecked onto an island and there was no adults, so they were left to defend for themselves, and they basically established their own hierarchy, and certain people are outcasts and there was the leader and whatnot. And the image of the pig featured in the movie always stuck with me because there was wild boar native to the island and they killed this boar or pig and put the head on a stick and they called it after the name of the film, Lord of the Flies, because there was no it was meant to be almost like an idol that they looked up to or worshipped in some way, because it wasn't the Lord over anything except these flies that buzzed around its head. So that really impacted me, and it influenced a lot of my decisions in the mask making. The Wicker Man is a classic horror movie about a policeman investigating a cult on an island, and lots of the people there believed in like pagan magic and like practiced all these weird festivals and like rituals and things like that, and they wore these animal masks during the festivities, which created this eerie kind of disturbing atmosphere, especially for the policeman who was Christian. He was a very religious man. It kind of really disturbed him, that these people were so disturbed and like really believed in what they were doing, and it was his demise that he stayed there too long. David Lynch's movies in particular, they're often very surreal, dreamlike narratives with no clear beginning or ending. They often can't be defined by a genre. They could be horror, romance or thriller all at once at the same time, but you never know what's going to happen next. The dreamlike and cinematic aspect is something that I wanted to tap into, expressing deeper human emotions and issues. A lot of the best sci-fi and fantasy films would have a great human story at its core. A lot of everything else is just eye candy and special effects, just to make it look cool. And that's what I'd like my work to be like. Something that is not what it first seems, but there's a lot more to it when you look under the layers, and there's more than meets the eye. That's why I make a film about a serial killer wolf butchering pigs only to be killed by a child. So the masks that I create are usually exaggerations or mutations of animal faces. I like to use animals as masks that have a stigma or often associated with human stereotypes, so I can create anthropomorphic personifications that question our need for a hierarchy and order. Like animals, mankind can give in to selfish desires, greed and a thirst for violence. Like last year, there was a number of tragic events that happened around the world. There was lots of riots and shootings and chaotic behaviour by the public. The London riots in particular fascinated me. The idea that anyone involved in the looting or breaking-ins could have been your kid's primary school teacher, or your next door neighbour, or an ambassador for the London Olympics, as it worked out. I find that creating the masks allows me to imagine characters and situations where I can explore moral themes such as good and evil, love and hate, greed and desire, helping me to form a commentary on the human condition. I usually begin making a mask by first drawing it on paper. I love to draw, and I'm quite confident in my ability to draw. The drawing part I find easy, but making it I find more difficult. I usually find that making the base out of newspaper or cardboard and sellotape helps me form a foundation that I can roll out like self-hardening clay and press it on top, and then I can shape the face to look like the character that I've drawn in my sketch. I don't tend to put much detail in it at that point, just to try and get a shape of the face. After the clay is hardened though, I usually apply layers of newspaper on top with PVA glue to create a paper mache mould. Once that's dried, I usually can peel that off after 2 to 3 days, and I can start sewing into it and applying fabrics onto the surface. The masks that I made last year for this film and the photography shoot are an eclectic bunch of critters. In each of them there's a variety of coloured fabrics and materials where I've used lots of different techniques such as tufting and rusting, where you get a rusty piece of metal and you pour vinegar on it, and then the rust would stain the fabric to try and get textures and different colours. I usually sew on top of this with machine stitch and then apply it onto the paper mache with hand stitch. Usually I try and create a contrast between the dark settings and the brightly coloured strange characters. Some of them look more intimidating, some look a bit run down, and some look more sad, and others a bit more creepy. The aesthetic of the masks is an accumulation of lots of different interests I have, such as the films, featuring creature special effects. I also have an interest in taxidermy, and I love detail, so I love combining all those elements with my drawings and the stitch. Together with my interest in masks and my textile skills, I like to use a variety of materials, and I've started using animal fur and animal teeth in the masks, so that they have like a semi-realistic, almost hyper-reality look to them. They're fake, but they have elements of a realness to them. For the aesthetic to become realised, I was referencing ideas of like a crumbling society in a post-apocalyptic setting that you usually find in science fiction. So the the stains in the fabric and the rusting is like the decay and the degradation of society, you know, with the materials. I look at a lot of different styles of mask, and lots of styles of making the masks from different cultures around the world. In particular, I enjoy looking at Mexican masks. There's just so much variety in the masks that they use, and you know, in the different festivities and the parades that they do. In particular, I like the Day of the Dead because there's so much colour and an explosion of pattern that they use. There's usually like a hodgepodge of different characters that they'd have involved. There'd be different classes of characters and certain roles from past stories or myths that they'd have. And then all of this is wrapped around like social politics, where they easily express their perspectives on certain issues, and you know, who they think should be in power, you know, in the politics. And you know, many of the parades will be made up of different village people, so they'd all have a different thing to say, and they do this by reinterpreting old stories and narratives, and you know, giving them a contemporary meaning, usually bringing in other influences from, you know, Western society and culture, even sometimes using cartoons and things like that. Usually the characters that they use would be split into different categories, like the elders, the ugly, the beautiful, and you know, the young. And all of these characters would be decided by you know, that person's social standing and their hierarchy in it, and that would determine the mask that they wear in the performance they do. Certain Mexican masks, like the tigre masks, which tigre meaning jaguar, have particularly inspired me because of their unusual shape, their colour and their texture. They're usually made of leather and have boar bristles and are usually painted different colours, sometimes yellow and greens depending on the clan that the men are from. The masks are usually worn by the men, and it's almost like a rite of passage on the feast day of the Holy Cross, which is usually on May the 3rd, 4th and 5th every year. And it's kind of like a rite of passage, but it's also a way of appealing to their gods and spirits. You know, during the spring season, they'd want lots of rain, and you know, that desert environment that they live in. And the jaguars usually appear by these certain trees, and so that's why they feature the jaguars in their masks. And the rite of passage would be the man would wear the mask, and then they'd run around and beat each other with knotted rope. So just like almost like a fierce competition in combat. So there's a certain theatricality to the mask, but then there's also the purpose that they're for like a competitive sport. So the masks usually come out looking very battered and worn, which is something I'd like my masks to look like, that they've, you know, they've seen a lot of things and they're kind of a bit beat up, and you know, they've been through hard times kind of thing. In my photography, I try to capture a bizarre, dark atmosphere where you're not exactly sure what's going on, but there's just an inkling of a narrative there for the viewer to try and unfold. And this is all wrapped around strange characters that occupy a world where you're not quite sure if they're insane human sociopaths putting on a performance, or if they're really animals that have just arrived at the same miserable place that their masters before them did. I decided pretty early on that photography is the best way that I could tell my stories and showcase the masks, after I'd done the video last year, which I was really pleased of. But I realised that I'd have much more control over the photographs, and a story could be told in just simpler means with just images. The more that is left to the imagination, I feel, is the better, because as the observer, they can decide how the story is going, and what the meaning is, and you know, what exactly is happening. You know, almost creating a hyper reality. Marizo Anzari, as an artist, who once said something that really inspired my photography whenever I was doing it last year. When we all look at a photograph, we somehow believe that we look at the truth or at some kind of reality, but we know that it's not, it's just a moment. We still look at it as if it's real. And Zari is an artist who often questions the idea of masquerade and identity within his work. He uses found photographs from the 1930s and the 1940s and then embroiders the photographic surface of the vintage portraits with brightly coloured threads. He collects the photos of forgotten faces and narratives and sews them together, giving them new meaning and adding a psychological presence to his work. It's interesting to see someone use masquerade in a completely different way. On flat images, while still creating a strong atmosphere in his portraits. Another artist who inspires me, Irada Aikaza, is a photographer who explores the atmosphere created in a space in between times of day that are neither day or night. It's that middle ground that is both magical and the unknown that she's interested in, where light and shadow become bipolar and sway between the positive and the negative. They're more like moments of chance and unpredictability. So the photographs are sometimes blurry and hard to make out, and you're not exactly sure what's in the scene, but it's left to your imagination to decide what is being depicted. I think they're interesting because they're more suggestive and surreal, and I think that's something I'd like my photography to be like. Sometimes an image doesn't have to make sense, and it can be random and disjointed, and I think that adds to the fantastical aspect of creating another world behind the lens. Thanks for watching, everyone, and hopefully that made some sense. It was interesting to hear about my work, and thanks for watching.